Imagine standing before the Great Pyramid of Giza, not as a tourist snapping photos, but as someone staring into humanity's oldest mirror. You place your hand on the cool stone and suddenly time collapses. Thousands of years rush past like wind. This towering monument, older than many civilizations we study in history books, rises not just as a tomb, but as a question. What if the pyramids are not simply ancient architecture, but the last surviving message from Earth's first advanced civilization? What if they are a warning, a guide, a testament that whispers across time, "We were here, we learned, do not forget us"? We often believe progress only moves forward, but what if, long before us, humanity reached another peak? And what if the pyramids are the only echo left of that forgotten greatness? The pyramids stand not just as structures, but as silent challenges to everything we think we know about human history and human capability. They rise from the desert like a question, carved in granite and limestone, echoing across time with impossible precision. When we look at them today, surrounded by tour buses, gift shops, and smartphones, it is easy to forget that these monuments existed long before electricity, before steel, before maps, before even the idea of modern nations. Yet they remain upright, proud, unmoving, and unbroken. They have seen storms, earthquakes, wars, and empires crumble into dust, and still they tower, defying us to understand how a people with no machines, no computers, and no global network built something our most advanced engineers continue to debate. Picture this: more than 2 million blocks of stone, each weighing as much as a car, and in many cases far more. Imagine the human effort, the coordination, the sheer will required just to move one stone, let alone place it perfectly in alignment with the stars and true north. There are skyscrapers today built using cranes, computer-guided lasers, and armies of machines, yet none of them have endured 4,000 years, nor will most of them last even a small fraction of that time. We live in an era where buildings are designed to be replaced, where technology evolves faster than memory, where concrete erodes and steel rusts. But the pyramids stand as if time itself respects them. They do not bow, they do not break, they do not forget. And here is the astonishing truth. Not a single written blueprint has survived, not a carving, not a papyrus scroll that definitively tells us how they did it. We have theories, we have speculation, but the people who built them left us puzzles instead of instructions, mysteries instead of manuals. It is almost as if they assumed the future would be smart enough to figure it out. Or they believed the pyramids themselves were the instruction. Perhaps they thought the form alone would teach us something: precision, patience, unity, ambition, and the humility to create something that lasts beyond our own lifetime. Think of modern society for a moment. We celebrate speed, we admire efficiency, we chase convenience. A building today can rise in months and collapse in decades. But the pyramids were not born from speed, they were born from endurance. They were not a project of a year or even a generation. Some say entire lifetimes were dedicated to them. Imagine waking up every day knowing you will work on something you will never see completed. Imagine dedicating your hands, your back, your years, not to your own glory, but to something that will outlive you by millennia. That kind of purpose is rare today. We build careers, fortunes, brands, followers. They built monuments to time and meaning. And although we often picture slaves dragging stones under whips, modern research paints a different story. Archaeologists have found workers' villages, medical care units, bread ovens, and evidence of camaraderie. These were not chained laborers. They were skilled people, proud to contribute to a vision greater than themselves. They were compensated, fed, housed, and honored. We have graffiti inside the pyramid chambers that suggests humor, team names, and pride. The Friends of Khufu and the Drunkards of Menkaure. These were people who believed they were building something sacred, something eternal, something that would speak long after their voices fell silent. Now consider the alignment of the pyramids. Not just with the earth, but with the stars. The Great Pyramid is aligned more precisely to true north than modern observatories built with GPS. How do you achieve that without satellites, compasses, or digital tools? How do you measure angles so precise that even today, with our technology, we stand uncertain? Was it genius? Was it knowledge lost, or was it a message encoded not in language but in geometry? Perhaps the builders knew that numbers survive where words decay. Perhaps they understood that stone outlasts parchment, and that mathematics is a universal tongue, one that future civilizations could still read long after their languages faded. Ancient civilizations understood things we rarely think about. They watched the stars not as decoration, but as a compass. They studied the earth not as property, but as a living map. They moved in harmony with seasons and cycles. They did not separate science from spirituality. Their engineering was worship, their architecture was philosophy made physical. Today, we worship data and algorithms. They worshipped the universe. And yet here we are, marveling at what they achieved, still trying to crack their secrets, still humbled by stones older than our oldest cities. Some argue the pyramids were tombs. Others say they were observatories or energy conductors or symbolic staircases to the heavens. But maybe the purpose isn't the point. The point is that something about these structures refuses to be ordinary. They do not simply occupy space, they command it. They do not just rest on earth, they seem to grow from it. The Great Pyramid is built so precisely that it is nearly perfectly level, despite its colossal size. Its base is almost a perfect square. Its sides form sacred ratios found in nature, art, and music. It contains shafts that align with stars. It is as if the builders carved not only stone, but meaning into every inch. And think, for a moment, about how fragile human memory is. We forget names in weeks, faces in years, stories in generations. Nations forget their founders. Families forget their great-grandparents. Time erases everything eventually, unless you carve your message in stone and shape it so boldly that time itself becomes your messenger. It's easy to dismiss the pyramids as relics of a distant era. But if we stop and listen, perhaps they are trying to say something deeper. What matters is not how fast we build, but how long what we build can stand. In our world, we often equate advancement with technology. We believe progress means faster, smaller, smarter devices. We think innovation lies in convenience, automation, compression. But true advancement may be measured not by what makes life easier, but by what makes life enduring. The builders of the pyramids were not racing against quarterly earnings or competing for digital likes. They were building monuments to existence, legacies to remind future generations that humanity once reached for greatness not through speed, but through patience, not through consumption, but through creation, not through distraction, but through devotion. There is a lesson in that contrast. Look around modern cities, towers of glass, screens everywhere, noise that never sleeps. Everything glittering, everything temporary. A single power outage and much of our world becomes silent, confused, disconnected. The pyramids do not flicker. They do not need electricity or wires. They are rooted deeper than technology. They are proof that the strongest foundations are not built of steel or code, but of intention and unity. They remind us that human capability is not measured in the tools we hold, but in the dreams we pursue. Imagine the conversations among those ancient workers. Imagine the moments of doubt, when the sun burned their backs, when stones seemed immovable, when skeptics surely whispered it could not be done. And imagine the voice inside them that answered, "We are building something greater than ourselves. We are shaping eternity." That voice echoes still. It tells us that human beings do not need to be perfect to achieve the extraordinary. They only need to be united by a purpose that outlives their fears. The pyramids challenge the arrogance of modern certainty. We think we are the peak of civilization because we can travel to space or talk to someone halfway across the world. Yet what will remain of us in 5,000 years? Will our skyscrapers still stand? Will our data survive? Will our culture be remembered? Or will the future sift through the dust of our digital age and wonder why we never built anything meant to last? There is something profoundly moving in realizing that the pyramids are not just structures. They are a dialogue between past and future, between generations who will never meet, but who share the same question: how will you be remembered? They ask us whether we are building lives that endure or simply lives that entertain. They remind us that the greatest human achievements are not measured in convenience, but in legacy, not in speed, but in significance. And so, When we stand before the pyramids, we are not just tourists. We are witnesses to the peak of human intention. We are seeing the result of a civilization that refused to believe anything was impossible, a people who understood that ambition without patience is noise, and patience without purpose is sleep. They found a balance we often lose, the balance between dreaming and doing, between vision and discipline. They show us what happens when humanity stops doubting itself and instead chooses to build something that belongs not only to the present, but to the ages. We may never fully understand how the pyramids were built, but perhaps the greater truth is this: the mystery itself is the message. Because when something stands against time with such strength, it forces us to ask not just how it was built, but why we have stopped building like that, why we settle for temporary accomplishments, why we rush through life chasing things that vanish instead of crafting things that endure. The pyramids remind us that greatness does not come from comfort, but from courage, not from haste, but from heart. And maybe, just maybe, they endure not only because of their stones, but because of the spirit that placed each stone there. A spirit that believed human beings are capable of the impossible. A spirit that whispers through the desert wind, you, too, can build something that lasts. You, too, can leave a mark time will not erase. Civilizations like to believe they are immortal. They build monuments, write laws, craft myths, and imagine their systems will stretch forever into the future. We are no different. We look at our cities, our technology, our satellites orbiting the Earth, and we tell ourselves that humanity has finally conquered time. But history whispers a different truth, one carved into ruins, buried in deserts, swallowed by jungles, and forgotten in dust. Civilizations do not fall in a single dramatic moment, they fade. They collapse slowly at first, then rapidly, like a mighty tree that looks strong until one day it suddenly crashes to the ground, revealing the rot that had grown unseen inside it for years. When we consider the possibility that the pyramids might be the last message from an earlier advanced society, we are not just entertaining fantasy, we are confronting a reality history has already shown us many times. Progress is not guaranteed. It can be built, and it can be lost. Think of the ancient Sumerians, the first known civilization to write, to record laws, to map the heavens. They flourished for thousands of years, believed their cities would shine forever, and then vanished. Their language disappeared, their knowledge scattered, their temples crumbled. Only scattered clay tablets remained to whisper their story. Think of the Indus Valley civilization, with advanced water systems, sanitation and organized cities, gone, its script unreadable, its people lost to time. Think of the Maya, whose pyramids pierce the jungle canopy like echoes of pride and brilliance, their astronomical knowledge astonishing even today. Yet their cities emptied, their society fractured, and if we travel far enough into human memory, we find countless others, kingdoms swallowed by sand, empires drowned by rising seas, societies consumed by disease, famine, war, arrogance, or the slow exhaustion of the land that fed them. We stand in modern times, believing ourselves immune to these fates, as if technology has somehow broken the ancient cycle. We scroll through our phones, drive electric cars, plan missions to Mars, and think collapse is a myth, something that belonged only to distant ancestors who lacked our intelligence, our science, our innovation. But is that true? Or are we simply repeating what every great civilization once believed, that collapse happens only to others? Every society in history was convinced it would endure. Not one thought its golden age would become a chapter in a dusty textbook. That certainty has always been humanity's greatest blind spot. Perhaps the pyramids exist not just to awe us, but to warn us. They rose as other civilizations fell. They endured while knowledge vanished and cultures turned to ash. They stand unbroken, while the names of kings and warriors and conquerors who came after them faded into obscurity. They are a reminder that greatness is not measured in how high we reach, but in how deeply we anchor ourselves to wisdom, resilience, and humility. If an ancient world once thrived and died, the pyramids may be asking us a question we are afraid to answer: what makes us truly believe we cannot fall too? Consider for a moment that collapse rarely begins with disaster. It begins with confidence. It begins when a society believes it has mastered nature, when it assumes progress moves in only one direction. It begins when people stop learning from the past because they believe they have outgrown it. It begins when leaders trade long-term vision for short-term gain, when communities stop valuing unity, when individuals forget that survival is shared, not solitary. The fall begins quietly, disguised as complacency, disguised as comfort. It begins when innovation becomes convenience instead of necessity, when we worry more about entertainment than education, more about consumption than conservation, more about pride than cooperation. Civilizations die from inside before they are ever conquered from outside. And in this light, the pyramids are not simply ancient marvels. They are pillars of memory. They remind us that once there were people who dreamed big, who built big, who believed humanity's potential was vast and sacred. Yet those dreamers either disappeared or evolved into societies we have long forgotten. The pyramids remain, not as symbols of triumph alone, but as guardians of caution. Even the greatest societies are only temporary guests on this earth. If we listen closely, they whisper, "Respect the fragility of greatness. Do not waste your moment in time." In our modern world, we face challenges not unlike those ancient civilizations did. Growing populations, resource strain, environmental pressures, widening inequality, conflicts driven by power and ideology rather than wisdom. We often imagine collapse would appear as sudden chaos, fires, wars, empty cities, but in reality, collapse begins in the unseen, in the soil losing its fertility, in the air becoming harder to breathe, in the trust between people dissolving quietly. And while technology gives us incredible power, it also introduces new vulnerabilities. A single cyber attack can disrupt a nation. A financial crash can send shockwaves across continents. A pandemic can humble economies and paralyze global systems. We are connected like never before, but connection means fragility spreads just as quickly as strength. The pyramids do not judge us. They simply observe. They have witnessed centuries of humanity rising and falling around them. They know the rhythm we pretend we have escaped, yet this is not a message of fear. It is a message of awakening. Collapse is not inevitable. The past does not condemn us. It teaches us. And perhaps the true gift of considering the pyramids as the last message from a first great civilization is not in imagining what they lost, but in recognizing what we still have time to protect. They may be challenging us. Do not repeat our forgotten mistakes. Build not only monuments of stone, but systems of fairness, cultures of empathy, technologies of sustainability, communities where knowledge is shared, not hoarded, where progress is measured not by wealth alone, but by wisdom, resilience, and compassion. Think of our daily lives. We wake up, rush through routines, chase deadlines, stare at screens, consume more than we need, and call this success. But civilizations do not crumble because they lacked convenience. They crumble because they lost purpose. They crumble when people stop feeling connected to one another, when life turns into survival rather than meaning, when individual ambition outweighs collective responsibility. The pyramids challenge us to ask, are we building a future that can stand, or are we building temporary lives in a temporary world? Imagine if those ancient builders had lived only for themselves. Imagine if they had said, "What difference can one lifetime make?" There would be no pyramids, no message, no legacy. Instead, they believed in something larger than themselves, so strongly that millennia later, strangers from distant lands still stand in awe of their work. We, too, have the capacity to build something that matters, not pyramids of stone, but foundations of justice, knowledge, sustainability, and peace. But like those ancient builders, we must think beyond today. We must act not only for our comfort, but for our grandchildren's survival and their grandchildren's dreams. Perhaps the pyramid's greatest lesson is that civilizations fall when they forget their responsibilities and rise when they honor their purpose. And maybe another message lies in their endurance, that humanity's strength is not in avoiding difficulty, but in confronting it together. If ancient people, without machines, without electricity, without digital tools, could coordinate millions of stones into perfect alignment, imagine what we can coordinate today if we choose unity over division, curiosity over arrogance, wisdom over convenience. We are not powerless against history's pattern. We are the writers of the next chapter, but only if we remember that civilizations do not die when the world turns against them. They die when they turn against themselves. We must ask, what future are we building? What structures, not physical, but moral, social, and cultural, are we contributing to? Will someone 5,000 years from now look at our world and say, they tried, they learned, they built something worthy? Or will they wonder why we squandered the time, technology, and power we had? The pyramids stand as both inspiration and mirror. They reflect our potential for greatness and our vulnerability to forgetting it. They remind us that humanity can achieve the extraordinary, but also that extraordinary things can be lost if we take them for granted. Their stones are not simply ancient relics. They are questions. They ask whether we have the humility to learn, the courage to adapt, and the wisdom to protect what we build. They ask whether we will let convenience weaken us or let conviction strengthen us. They ask whether we will be a civilization remembered for its brilliance or one remembered for its blindness. And in that quiet desert, under the same sky our ancestors once looked upon, the pyramids are not simply standing. They are waiting to see whether we will listen, waiting to see whether our civilization will rise beyond its challenges or fade like those before it, waiting to see whether we will choose lasting greatness over temporary comfort. They do not move, but they move us. They do not speak, but they speak to us. And what they say is simple, powerful, eternal. Do not waste the gift of your time. Do not assume you cannot fall. Build something that endures. Knowledge is the one thing that outlives everything else. Empires crumble, kings vanish, languages dissolve, and entire cultures can disappear as though they were never here at all. But knowledge, when preserved, when shared, when built with intention, becomes immortal. The pyramids remind us of this truth in their silent, unshakable presence. The pharaohs who commanded them are gone, their hieroglyphs weathered, their riches stolen, their gods forgotten by time. Yet the ideas behind their construction still stand, commanding attention, demanding wonder, urging curiosity. It is as if they whisper across centuries, saying, "You may forget our names, but you will never forget what we knew." Think about how fragile life is. A human being, no matter how powerful, no matter how wealthy, no matter how adored, eventually returns to dust. A ruler may have armies, palaces, treasures, but in a handful of decades, all of it becomes memory, and memory too fades. So what truly matters? What transcends the individual? What remains when we are gone? It is not the throne we sit on, but the ideas we plant. It is not the wealth we accumulate, but the wisdom we leave behind. The pyramids are proof that the greatest legacy is not dominance, but knowledge, not force, but understanding, not fame, but contribution. Imagine the people who built them, generations who never saw electricity, who never held a printed book, who never typed a word on a screen. Yet they left behind engineering marvels that still puzzle scientists, mathematicians, and architects today. They encoded mathematical relationships, ratios we find in music, in nature, in galaxies, embedded into stone at a scale that defies imagination. They charted the heavens without telescopes, understood cycles of the stars without satellites, aligned stone to cosmic truth without digital guidance. And they did all of this not for a trophy, not for applause, not for global recognition, but because somewhere in their collective mind, they understood that knowledge is sacred, worth carving into the earth itself. Now pause for a moment and think of yourself. Think of the world we live in today, overflowing with information, drowning in data, yet starved for wisdom. We scroll endlessly, consume knowledge like fast food, collect facts without understanding. But true knowledge, the kind that shapes civilizations, requires patience, effort, humility. It requires us to look up from our screens and into the universe, to ask not only how things work, but why they matter. The ancient builders did not have infinite information at their fingertips, but what they knew, they honored. What they learned, they preserved. They built not just with hands, but with intention. And maybe that is why their knowledge has lasted. We often think of progress as invention after invention, technology stacked upon technology. Yet look how quickly modern knowledge can vanish. A corrupted hard drive, a crashed server, a power failure, and whole libraries of data could disappear. Our digital world is vast, but it is fragile. Information stored in cloud servers can vanish with a glitch, a hack, a collapse. But the pyramids carved in stone endure without electricity, without networks, without code. They do not need updates, patches, or backups. They stand concrete and eternal. Proof that sometimes the most powerful knowledge is not the newest, but the knowledge that is built to last. There is something deeply human about our desire to leave a mark, to be remembered, to feel that our life mattered beyond the span of our breath. Yet how often do we chase the wrong kind of remembrance? We chase status, followers, likes, applause. Fleeting echoes that fade as quickly as they appear. Instead of building meaning, we often build distraction. Instead of cultivating wisdom, we pursue attention. But the pyramids remind us that greatness is not measured in moments. It is measured in centuries. And wisdom is not what the world sees today, but what the world still sees tomorrow. Think about knowledge in your own life. Who taught you the most valuable lessons? Was it a famous person? Or was it a teacher who believed in you, a parent who sacrificed for you, a friend who spoke the truth you needed to hear, a mentor who shared their experience? Often the greatest knowledge comes from ordinary people doing extraordinary things quietly. The pyramid builders were not celebrities. They were mothers, fathers, artisans, thinkers, dreamers, people who believed that contributing to something greater than themselves mattered more than being noticed. And so they left a legacy none of them could have individually achieved. Knowledge is not just facts. It is identity, culture, memory, truth. When knowledge is lost, identity dissolves with it. Consider civilizations that left no written language. We know so little about them because nothing was preserved in a way we can decode. Now imagine if our entire modern world vanished tomorrow. If someone thousands of years in the future uncovered our buildings, what would remain? Screens dark, hard drives silent, digital records unreadable. Would our skyscrapers still stand? Would our libraries still exist? Would our knowledge survive? Or would we, like so many before us, be reduced to fragments, puzzling artifacts, unanswered questions? The pyramids challenge us to choose our legacy. They push us to ask, what knowledge are we preserving? What wisdom are we passing on? What truths are we willing to carve into the stone of the future? Knowledge is not valuable unless it is shared. The ancient world understood that teaching was sacred work. Knowledge moved from builder to apprentice, from astronomer to student, from mathematician to child. They built systems of learning embedded into their culture, not limited to institutions or elite intellectual circles. Today we have access to more information than any generation before us. Yet many use knowledge not to uplift, but to compete, not to illuminate, but to impress. But knowledge hoarded is knowledge wasted. A secret genius builds nothing. A selfish thinker leaves no legacy. A society that guards wisdom, instead of spreading it, becomes weaker, not stronger. Look at cultures that hoarded power. They fell. Look at communities that shared knowledge. They advanced. When knowledge flows, civilizations rise. When it is dammed by ego or fear, they stagnate. The pyramids stand as a monument not only to ancient intelligence, but to a culture that believed intelligence belonged to everyone engaged in creation. They remind us that knowledge should not be locked inside institutions, but carried in hearts and hands. Every modern breakthrough, every hospital, every school, every vaccine, every technological achievement emerged from someone refusing to let knowledge die with them. And so the question becomes, how do we live in a way that honors knowledge today? Perhaps it starts in the simplest of places, in conversations with children, in generosity with our experiences, in curiosity instead of judgment, in humility rather than arrogance. It begins when we choose to ask instead of assume, to listen instead of boast, to build instead of dismiss. True knowledge is not loud, it is quiet confidence. It does not intimidate, it enlightens. It does not elevate one person above another, it lifts everyone together. Imagine a world where knowledge is treated the way the builders treated the pyramids, as sacred, as enduring, as worth constructing with care. Imagine schools that teach not only skills but meaning. Communities where learning is celebrated, not mocked. Leaders who measure success not by accumulation, but by contribution. Innovators who build not for profit alone, but for humanity's future. This is the spirit that built wonders in stone, and it can build wonders again, not in deserts, but in minds and hearts. Knowledge is our true inheritance. It is the only treasure that cannot be stolen, cannot be lost once truly learned, cannot be destroyed unless we choose to forget it. The pyramids remind us to hold tightly to wisdom, to pass it forward, to protect it like fire in the darkness. They whisper that the most powerful structure is not the one that reaches the sky, but the one that reaches the soul. And so, when we stand before those ancient walls, we do not simply see stone. We see a message carved by a people who refuse to let their brilliance die. We see a lesson etched into time. The only legacy worth leaving is knowledge that elevates humanity. The only mark worth making is the one that teaches, inspires, and endures. The pyramids do not ask us to worship the past, they ask us to learn from it. They ask us to be builders not only of structures, but of minds. They ask us to remember that civilizations are remembered not by what they once controlled, but by what they taught the world. If we listen, truly listen, the pyramids speak a truth clearer than any inscription. Wisdom is eternal, if we choose to carry it forward. The story of the pyramids is not just a story of architecture or engineering. It is a story of people. Ordinary human beings who did something extraordinary because they believed in something together. When we marvel at the stones, at the precision, at the impossible ambition, we often forget the most important part of the miracle, the countless hands, hearts, and minds that worked in harmony. We forget the sweat, the breath, the aching backs, the calloused hands, the laughter and arguments, the mistakes and corrections, the shared meals, the shared dreams. We forget that even the grandest monument is built one stone at a time, and one soul at a time. And the pyramids teach us a truth we desperately need today. When humans unite around a shared purpose, our potential becomes infinite. Imagine a world thousands of years ago. No machines, no engines, no cranes, no computers. Just people. People who woke each morning with the knowledge that they were part of something greater than themselves. People who could not afford the luxury of doubt, because doubt weakens effort, and effort was everything. People who believed that greatness was not accidental. It was created, step by step, with unwavering collaboration. They did not divide themselves by ego or status or fear. They came together for a vision bigger than any single life. Think of that unity. Try to feel it. Hundreds of thousands of individuals, farmers, stone cutters, mathematicians, artisans, laborers, cooks, planners, water carriers. Different talents, different backgrounds, different roles, but one shared mission. They did not all know the pharaoh personally. They did not all understand the calculations or the astronomy or the sacred geometry, but they knew their work mattered. They knew they were building something that would outlive them, and that belief, that shared conviction, created one of the greatest achievements in human history. Now look at us today. We live in a world with unimaginable power. We can send messages across continents in a second, cure diseases, fly through the sky, explore other planets, build machines that think and learn. And yet, somewhere along the way, we have allowed division to grow louder than unity. We argue, we isolate, we draw lines between us and them. We defend differences instead of celebrating common dreams. We chase personal success and forget collective strength. We compete for recognition rather than collaborate for greatness, and in doing so, we shrink our possibilities. But the pyramids stand as a reminder that humanity did its most astonishing work when we stood not apart but together. They whisper to us that progress is not born from individual genius alone. It is born from shared effort, shared sacrifice, shared belief. Greatness is not a solo act, it is a chorus, and every voice matters. Picture the workers at the base of the pyramid. One person carries water to cool the stone tools. Another shapes a block. Another holds it. Another smooths the surface. Another ensures alignment. Each step seems small in isolation. Each task might even look unimportant if seen alone. But together, they form a masterpiece. That is the power of collective effort. What seems insignificant becomes indispensable. What feels small becomes monumental. And isn't life the same? Most of us are not building pyramids, but we are building something. We are building families, careers, communities, futures. We are building opportunities for children, pathways for others, moments of kindness that ripple farther than we realize. It is easy to feel like our individual contribution is too small, too quiet, too ordinary to matter. But if a stone is removed, the pyramid weakens. If a hand is missing, the work slows. If a spirit falters, the energy shifts. Every effort counts. Every person matters. We are architects of the invisible, the bonds, memories, values, and dreams that hold civilizations together. The pyramid builders did not work in silence because they were forced. They worked in harmony because they were inspired. They were not slaves to power. They were servants to meaning. They believed in the sacredness of what they built. They believed that the world could be shaped by human hands, guided by human vision, and perhaps the most powerful truth is this: they believed that their legacy was not measured by what they owned, but by what they gave to the future. What if we lived with that mindset today? What if we remembered that the greatest achievements in history were never made by people acting alone? Imagine if we chose collaboration over competition, wisdom over pride, vision over ego. Imagine schools where learning is shared, not hoarded. Governments where serving humanity outweighs serving power. Businesses where success lifts communities, not just shareholders. Families where support is unconditional, not transactional. Imagine a world where unity is our default, not our exception. The pyramids challenge us to see beyond ourselves. When people come together, they become capable of miracles. When they stand apart, even the simplest dreams crumble. Our world today feels divided in many ways, politically, culturally, emotionally. We forget that every human being, regardless of language or nation or belief, wakes each day with hopes, fears, and the longing to belong. We forget that unity does not mean sameness. It means shared purpose, shared compassion, shared destiny. The pyramid builders did not all look the same, or think the same, or pray the same, but they built the same future. Unity is not the absence of struggle. It is the commitment to move forward together despite struggle. Collaboration is not the elimination of disagreement. It is the promise to find common ground deeper than disagreement. Humans are not meant to thrive alone. We are wired for connection, cooperation, contribution, and when we isolate ourselves, emotionally, socially, morally, we shrink, we weaken. We forget what we can become when we join forces. Think about moments in your own life when unity made the impossible possible. Think about when loved ones gathered to support you through pain, when friends helped you reach a goal, when a team effort accomplished something you could never have done alone. Think about the times when someone's belief in you gave you strength you didn't know you had. We have all felt the quiet magic that happens when hearts align. That magic built pyramids, and it can build so much more. But unity requires courage. It requires humility. The humility to admit we need one another, the humility to ask for help, the humility to honor every contribution, not just the ones in the spotlight. It requires patience to move together, even when individually we could move faster. It requires trust that we are stronger when we rise together. And most of all, unity requires vision, the belief that we is greater than me. When we stand alone, we may feel powerful, but we are limited. When we stand together, we become unstoppable. A single wave can crash and vanish, but a tide reshapes the shore. A single flame flickers, but 1,000 flames illuminate the world. Every major progress in history, the end of empires, the rise of freedoms, the birth of nations, the breakthroughs in science and medicine, happened not because one person demanded glory, but because many people united for purpose. So what do the pyramids ask of us today? They ask us to remember that we are builders, not just of structures, but of society, of compassion, of possibility. They ask us to rise above envy, above division, above the illusion that we are alone. They ask us to unite not only in moments of crisis, but in moments of creation. They ask us to honor every role, every worker, every dreamer, every contribution. Because greatness is never born in isolation, it is forged in togetherness. Let us not admire the pyramids as relics of the past. Let us see them as instructions for the future. a reminder that no tool, no technology, no invention will ever be as powerful as human beings united by a shared dream. If stone and sweat and belief could carve wonders into the earth, then what could we carve into time with the resources, intelligence, and global connection we have today? We do not need to build pyramids of stone anymore. Today, we are called to build pyramids of compassion, pyramids of justice, pyramids of innovation, pyramids of peace, pyramids of hope. We are called to build institutions that uplift, technologies that empower, societies that embrace dignity for all. But we will not succeed if we build alone. We rise together or not at all. The pyramids stand not just as monuments of the past, but as mirrors, reflecting what humans become when we choose unity over division, purpose over ego, and legacy over convenience. They remind us that greatness is not an accident, it is a choice. And it is a choice we must make again, right now, in our time. If the pyramids truly are the final message from Earth's first great civilization, then they are not simply stone structures. They are a reminder, maybe even a warning. They stand as silent teachers, whispering to us through time, urging us to rise above forgetfulness and complacency. They tell us that greatness can be achieved and also lost. They show us that civilizations do not just collapse from lack of strength. They collapse from lack of vision, lack of unity, and lack of memory. And the question the pyramids place in our hands today is simple: what legacy are we building? And will future generations see it as guidance or as a cautionary tale? Every one of us, whether we realize it or not, is part of a timeline bigger than our own life. We stand on the shoulders of people who lived thousands of years ago, and one day someone will stand on ours. The pyramids remind us that we inherit the world, and we leave a world behind. What we do with our moment, our era, our generation, becomes the story others must live with. Those ancient builders were not thinking about fame or wealth or comfort. They were thinking about continuity. They were thinking about endurance, about meaning, about leaving behind something that would speak long after their voices had faded. They wanted to be remembered not through names carved in gold, but through greatness carved in stone. And in that way, they succeeded beyond imagination. They left behind a legacy that still takes our breath away. Today we live in an age of incredible speed. We rush, we multitask, we chase instant gratification, instant results, instant validation. We build things that are impressive, but often temporary. We create information that spreads quickly, but fades just as fast. We celebrate technology, but sometimes forget wisdom. We feel connected through screens, but sometimes disconnected in our hearts. We build tall buildings, yet sometimes forget to build deep foundations. Compared to the timeless patience that created the pyramids, our age often feels like it treasures convenience over perseverance, consumption over creation, reaction over reflection. But the pyramids call us back to something deeper. They call us to remember that the most meaningful things in life take time, dedication, and a sense of purpose larger than ourselves. They ask us, are we building monuments to ego or monuments to humanity? Are we investing in the future or merely indulging in the present? Are we passing wisdom forward or allowing it to expire with us? They challenge us to stop thinking in terms of headlines and start thinking in terms of centuries. To stop asking, what can I gain today? And begin asking, what am I giving to tomorrow? Consider a parent who wakes early every morning to work, not because they love the grind, but because they love the child they are trying to uplift. That parent is building. They are shaping a legacy not carved in stone, but in character, in opportunity, in sacrifice. Consider a teacher who stays late after class to help a struggling student, believing in that child's future even when the world has not yet seen it. That teacher is building. Consider the doctor in a rural village who treats patients with limited resources, the engineer working on sustainable energy solutions, the young activist fighting for a kinder world, the neighbor who checks on the elderly widow next door. They are all building pyramids, not with limestone blocks, but with compassion, commitment, and courage. Legacy is not just about what we leave behind physically. It is about the echoes of kindness, wisdom, and love we release into the world. And yet legacy is not guaranteed. Civilizations fall not because they lack intelligence, but because they forget humility. They stop asking questions. They stop learning from history. They allow arrogance to replace curiosity, convenience to replace responsibility. They grow proud of their creations and blind to their weaknesses. And when they fall, they leave behind the ruins. Warnings carved not in words, but in the silence of what once was. Perhaps the pyramids survived not just because they were built with stone, but because they were built with intention. Intention rooted in awareness that time will test everything humanity builds. We have achieved wonders in our age: science, medicine, technology, communication. But are we anchoring those achievements in values strong enough to endure? Knowledge without wisdom collapses. Power without humility corrupts. Wealth without generosity divides. Technology without humanity isolates. And progress without memory repeats mistakes. The pyramids ask us to balance innovation with introspection. They ask us to honor the past not by living in it, but by learning from it. Imagine, for a moment, an archaeologist thousands of years in the future. Picture them standing in the ruins of our cities, just as we stand in the sands of Giza. What will they see? Will they uncover evidence of a society that cared, that created beauty, that nurtured life, that sought harmony? Or will they find signs of a civilization that chased convenience until it consumed itself? Will they find a world preserved by wisdom, or damaged by short-sightedness? Will they find monuments to collaboration, or scars of division? This is not a burden, it is an invitation. The pyramids do not judge us, they inspire us. They remind us that we are capable of greatness beyond imagination when we dare to think not only of ourselves, but of the future. They remind us that legacy is not an accident, it is a deliberate choice. It is built through actions we take every day, choices we make every hour, values we defend even when it is difficult. It is built through how we treat one another, how we protect the planet we live on, how we educate our children, how we preserve history, and how we dream for the future. A legacy is not built in a moment. It is built in the quiet hours no one sees, in persistence, in patience, in belief. It is built when we choose honesty over convenience, kindness over comfort, truth over popularity. It is built when we commit to something greater than personal gain. And every time you choose to do what is right, even when no one is watching, you place another stone in your pyramid. We have been given a gift, the ability to learn from those who came before us. The pyramids are teachers without voices, yet they speak loudly to those willing to listen. They tell us, do not live life only for yourself. Do not build only for today. Do not let noise drown meaning. Do not trade depth for speed. Do not forget that everything you do, every moment you live, sends ripples into time. You may not build something that lasts thousands of years, and you don't have to. The question is not whether the world remembers your name, it is whether the world becomes better because you were here. Some legacies are carved in stone, others are carved in hearts. The world needs both. A simple act of kindness can last longer than a monument. A word of encouragement can change a life. A dream pursued can inspire generations. Legacy is not measured by scale, but by sincerity. So let us ask ourselves, what are we building? Are we building resentment or understanding, fear or hope, distrust or unity, waste or wisdom, noise or meaning? The future will reflect our answers. The pyramids are proof that humanity can rise beyond limitations, beyond chaos, beyond time. When we choose to, they prove that vision shapes reality. They prove that legacy begins with belief, belief in purpose, belief in possibility, belief in one another. If there was a civilization before us that left the pyramids as their final message, they are telling us you too have the power to create something eternal. You too can rise above doubt and fear. You too can define your era not by its challenges, but by its courage. You too can leave behind more than you found. We are all passing through time, but what we leave behind will stay. One day, long after our footsteps fade, someone will walk where we stood. They will feel the world we shaped. They will live with the choices we made. And they will ask the same question we ask when we look at ancient monuments. Who were these people? What did they believe? What did they value? What legacy did they build? Let us live in a way that answers proudly. Let us live in a way that says we remembered, we learned, we cared, we dreamed, We created not only with our hands, but with our hearts. We built not just monuments of stone, but monuments of spirit, monuments of compassion, unity, knowledge, and love. Because long after our voices fade, long after our names are forgotten, long after our days have passed into history, our legacy will remain. And may it stand, like the pyramids, not as a mystery, but as a message, that we lived with purpose, that we believed in humanity, that we reached for greatness, and that we left a world worthy of those who will follow. So now, after journeying through time and imagination, after standing beside those ancient stones and listening to the whispers of forgotten ages, we return not just informed, but transformed. The pyramids are no longer silent shapes on the horizon of history. They are voices, they are mirrors, they are reminders of who we were, who we are, and who we still have the chance to become. They do not simply ask us to marvel, they challenge us to rise. They invite us to remember that inside every human being lies the capacity to dream beyond limits, to build beyond ego, to believe beyond fear. We are not separate from those ancient builders. We are their continuation. Their courage flows in our blood. Their curiosity beats in our hearts. Their legacy waits for us to carry it forward. We are the newest link in the chain of human greatness, and it is our turn to decide what we will leave behind. Will future generations look back at us with gratitude, inspired by our unity, our wisdom, our compassion? Or will they look back in confusion, wondering how a species with so much potential forgot the sacred responsibility of time? The pyramids have stood through storms, through wars, through the rise and fall of empires. They endured not because they are made of stone, but because they are made of purpose. And now, we must ask ourselves, what will endure because of us? What will stand because we stood? What will rise because we dared to rise? The world today does not need another monument of stone. It needs monuments of humanity. It needs minds that think boldly, hearts that feel deeply, hands that work together, and spirits that refuse to shrink beneath doubt or divide beneath difference. It needs dreamers, builders, believers. It needs you. It needs all of us. This is not just a speech. It is a calling to remember that history is not behind us. We are still writing it. A calling to honor the past, not by worshipping it, but by surpassing it. A calling to see the pyramids not as the end of an ancient story, but as the beginning of our next one. Someday, long after we are gone, someone will stand where we stand and ask the same question we asked today. What if these were the last message from an earlier civilization? And let us hope their answer is filled not with regret, but with awe. Let us hope they say, they remembered, they learned, they dreamed, they built a world worthy of humanity's potential. Stand tall like the pyramids, think boldly like their builders, live with purpose, create with love, build not just for today, but for forever. Because long after our voices fade, our actions will echo across time. And if we choose wisely, if we choose courageously, then we too will leave a message to the future.